right, welcome to another episode of Assembly Language. Today we're going to look at widening from one type to another. This is done a fair amount in C code. You've seen it already. After this presentation, you should go ahead and try activity 4 in the folder called 4-widening. Let's get into this. So here's a couple of examples of widening. In this case up here, we can see we had a parameter that was an int, and then we widened it in order to do this multiplication. And then here's another one using unsigned, where the parameters that came in were chars, and then they were widened into unsigned longs by doing this casting here. And so this is typically the way we want to do this to ensure that we are using the same types when we're working. And you saw this in some of your previous work in the course. Okay, so in order to do this, we're going to look at a couple of different very important instructions, new instructions that you're going to see a fair amount of. Let's start with the first one. It's called move Z. And what this does is it zeroes out the higher order bytes when moving from one register to another. And let's look at the various different kinds of these. So move Z always has two more letters after it. And so if you look here is move Z with BW on it. Now what this means is move a byte into a word with 0 extension, meaning the byte will go in and then the rest of the register up to a word will be 0. And similarly, you can see here that you can use a byte, move a byte into a double word or an L. You remember here, down here are the 4 different letters that we typically use for the length of the register that we're going to be using for a particular instruction. And so we can move from a byte to a word, a byte to a long, a byte to a quad word, 4 bytes. And then we can move from a word to a long and a word to a quad word. And so when we 0 extend, this makes sense to be used. This Z means 0 sign extension. And so that makes sense to be used for unsigned values. So keep that in mind. The move Z, zeroing out the sign extension, is used for unsigned. Let's look at an example of this. So here is an instruction, move ZBL. And so we're going to move from a byte into a long. And so we could assume in this case that a char was an argument that was being sent in. And if that's the case, the argument is now in this very lowest portion of the D, or full-length RDI register. So the char is down here in DIL. And so we might need to widen that char, and if we were doing that, we would use something like this. And let's look at exactly what happens for this. So the E7 will go right here. And then the rest of EDI, because it could have had something else in it, is going to get zeroed out like this. And so that's what that move is going to be able to do, is zero out the higher order bytes, and therefore the value that's now in EDI is the widened original byte. So that's how the move Z works. And again, that's used for unsigned values. So this would have been an unsigned char. Now, we also have signed values, of course, and so there's a second instruction, move S, and it too has these letters after it that show what sort of a move is being done, from a single byte to a word, a byte to a long word or double word, which is our 4 bytes, and then also moving bytes and longs and words into quad words. So these are used with sign values. That's what the S is indicating, and the sign is extended. So this then will work for negative numbers, for example, because we'll do a sign extension. So instead of zeroing it out, it might be that we'd put all ones into the higher order bytes when the move is done. And so that's the idea there. With sign values, we need to make sure we're doing a sign extension. Okay, so now that you've seen a description of these two new instructions, what I want you to do is go ahead and try ASM Activity 4. And I've got some questions in there, and I'd like you to go ahead and study the examples there. And also, if you'd like, try more examples on your own of widening. So put some other C code in there where you're widening from one type to another and then using it in some sort of an expression, and see what you get out of your assembly code when you recompile it. All right. Go ahead and work on that activity, and then you can come back and watch the next presentation.